Following the dot-com crash, as money dried up and the company's stock crashed 95%, the executives set up an emergency meeting. While their e-commerce business was still growing rapidly, it was far from being profitable. So they decided to launch a platform that helped other companies to build their own e-commerce websites called merchant.com. Hearing this story, you probably thought that this is how Shopify got started, right? Well, this was actually the story of Amazon and their diversification effort after the dot-com crash. But this wasn't actually all that successful. You see, Amazon's rapid growth throughout the 1990s had led to a rather unorganized business environment, which made it extremely difficult for them to successfully launch merchant.com. So Amazon quickly dropped the idea and started testing out other paths for diversification. 6 years later though, in 2006, Shopify leveraged the same business model as merchant.com and they knocked it out of the park. So here's the story of Shopify and how they showed up Amazon at their own game. Taking a look back, the story of Shopify circles back to a man named Tobias Lütke who was born in 1981 in Koblenz, West Germany. His father was an internal medicine doctor while his mother was a teacher for disabled children. From a very young age, Toby had a massive interest in modifying computer hardware and coding. So, when he was 6 years old, his parents bought him a computer similar to the Commodore 64. And within the next few years, Toby taught himself how to write code and develop simple games. Despite this innate curiosity to experiment and learn by himself, it doesn't seem like Toby was a big fan of school. Whenever a teacher asked him a question, Toby preferred to give them smart, witty responses instead of actually answering the question. And Toby took shortcuts whenever possible and tried to pass his classes by spending the least amount of effort possible. In my opinion, I think Toby simply had his priorities straight from a very young age. But to his parents and teachers, this was quite concerning. So they had Toby take a bunch of psychoanalysis exams to identify if he had any learning disabilities, but they were never able to diagnose anything. And as Toby grew older, his behavior from a traditional perspective simply got worse and worse. Toby says that he had a serious authority problem and hated answering to teachers. So as soon as he could drop out of school, he did at age 16 from 10th grade. Toby went ahead and joined a computer science apprentice program at Simon's, but he didn't like this very much either. You see, the apprenticeship required him to use Java, which he felt was a super restrictive programming language. In this world filled with restrictions and limitations, Toby felt that there was only one true escape, which was snowboarding. Toby would regularly go on snowboarding trips, and one of these trips took him to Whistler, British Columbia, where he met a girl named Fiona McKean. As you would guess, these two would fall in love, and due to the great distance between Germany and Canada, they would have to figure out a living situation. Initially, they agreed to live in each other's countries in alternating years. First, Fiona came to Germany and lived with Toby for a year. And then, Toby moved to Canada to live with Fiona for a year. But he never came back. Despite finding the love of his life, Toby was still kind of a bum. At the end of the day, he was still a high school dropout that had no idea what he wanted to do. So he started networking with people in Canada. One of the first people he ran into was a man named Scott Lake. Scott was a family friend of Fiona and would regularly come to family events, and this is when he would meet Toby. Toby was significantly younger than Scott, coming in at 12 years younger. But the two had several similar interests, and soon enough, they decided to start a business together in 2004. The initial plan wasn't anything crazy or revolutionary. The duo just wanted to sell something that they were both passionate about, snowboards, through the internet. Though the idea was simple, they wanted it to be personal. In other words, they didn't just want to flip snowboards on eBay. So they decided to launch their own e-commerce website. But all the e-commerce software available at the time was absolute crap according to Toby. So Toby decided to develop his own. As you might expect with Toby though, he refused to use any of the popular programming languages because he thought that all of them were too restricting. So instead, he used an obscure Japanese programming language called Ruby. Ruby was so obscure that it didn't even have written documentation in English. Luckily for Toby though, a Danish programmer named David Hansen would develop a new framework for Ruby around the same time, which made it much easier for Toby to code. This new framework also generated a lot of interest within the coding space regarding Ruby, which got Toby involved in several online forums relating to Ruby. Toby showed a lot of his software on these forums, such as his software for processing credit cards, and he quickly became a leading voice within the community. In the meantime, Toby and Scott were also packaging up snowboards and sending them to customers. But given all the interest online surrounding Toby's software, it became pretty clear to Toby and Scott that selling software was the way to go. Despite this grand vision, neither Toby nor Scott had much money, so they started raising money from their friends and family. They were able to raise a total of $200,000 from 10 people, with the biggest investors being Fiona's father, Bruce McKean, and Toby's uncle. Fun fact, this investment would end up making Bruce a billionaire. Anyway, using these funds, our duo went ahead and hired a German programmer named Daniel Weinand, who they consider to be a co-founder of Shopify. The name Shopify has actually been around since the start of the company, but the company wasn't actually originally called Shopify. The company was actually called Jaded Pixel, and Shopify was just the name of the software. Given the clout Toby had amongst online forums, they were rapidly able to build up a base of customers and start pulling in monthly revenue of about $8,000. Over the next 2 years, this number would almost grow tenfold to $60,000 per month. But this also forced Toby to raise a lot more money, which he didn't really want to do. It's not that Toby didn't want to bring on investors, but rather he didn't want to bring on venture capitalists who he thought would ruin the company. Scott strongly disagreed with this perspective and felt that venture capital was the way to go. And given the company's desperate need for cash, Toby gave in and started pitching to VCs. But no VC really wanted to invest in an e-commerce business. They felt like they had already tried that in the 1990s, which resulted in the dot-com crash and massive losses. So why would they try that again? After failing to raise more capital, Scott would leave the company and Toby would become the CEO of Shopify. Toby didn't really want to be CEO though, he just wanted to code great software. But with the future of the company at stake, Toby would try to teach himself business. He started meeting with a lot more VCs, but these meetings just exposed how clueless he was. Toby wasn't familiar with the technical business terminology like margin ratios, so he struggled to answer these questions when VCs asked him. But Toby didn't let this stop him. After every VC meeting, Toby would learn about the terms that he didn't know, which allowed him to approach the next meeting with just a bit more knowledge. Slowly, Toby's VC meetings started to get better and better. But then the 2008 financial recession hit, which basically made it impossible for an e-commerce company to raise money. And with that, Toby knew that he was truly on his own. The next 2 years would end up being the roughest years of Shopify's history. Toby and Fiona had to live with Fiona's parents, and her father had to fund payroll from his savings. Toby says that the situation was extremely demoralizing. Every day at meetings, Toby discussed the long-term goals and vision of Shopify. But the truth was that it wasn't clear if Shopify would even survive the next few months. Toby refused to focus on the short term though. He was adamant that they needed to think long-term for the company to truly be successful. And since he couldn't do too much about the company's financial situation for the time being, he decided to focus on building a phenomenal team. You would think that Toby was looking for genius programmers that were willing to go all in on Shopify, but this couldn't be further from the truth. Toby says that he would hire a team player over a brilliant jerk any day of the week. Also, despite all this hardship, Toby never pulled an Elon. He refused to work 100-hour weeks, and he refused to force employees to do that either. Toby strongly believes that with creative work, you can't cheat. He says that everyone only has 5 creative hours per day, and trying to work for longer hours doesn't lead to better results. While this strongly goes against all the beliefs of Silicon Valley, Toby stuck with it even during the worst of times. And as the world slowly recovered from the financial recession, the interest in e-commerce started to come back to life, and Shopify was finally able to achieve profitability by 2010. Around the same time, VCs became more open to investing in e-commerce once again, and the Bessemer Venture Partners would agree to invest $7 million into Shopify for 20% of the company in December of 2010. The following year, Shopify would raise another $15 million, and in 2013, they would raise $100 million. Toby would top all this off by taking Shopify public in 2015, which valued the company at just over $1 billion. Toby had successfully navigated the company through the recession and built a team that was stronger than ever before. But Shopify was yet to even receive their biggest push. Up until this point, Shopify mainly appealed to small business owners who wanted to expand their business through the internet. But in 2017 and 2018, we saw the rise of one of the most infamous get-rich-quick schemes of all time, dropshipping. If you're not familiar with dropshipping, it's basically the idea to start an online store using Shopify, sourcing products on Alibaba or AliExpress, and then linking the two together. This way, you don't have to physically deal with the product and your job is to just market it. While it sounds simple in theory, it's actually extremely difficult. Now, this isn't to say that you can't make great money through dropshipping, but like with any business, the vast majority fail, and it's not nearly as easy as the dropshipping gurus make it out to be. Nonetheless, this explosive trend towards dropshipping was extremely lucrative for Shopify and sent them to the moon. Last year, Shopify reached a peak market cap of $212 billion. Since then, Shopify stock has actually gotten destroyed along with the rest of the market, dropping over 60%. This has crumbled Shopify's market cap down to just over $80 billion, but this is really nothing to worry about. If we look at Shopify's revenue and gross profit graphs, they haven't even had a single negative quarter. So I find it hard to believe that Shopify will be fundamentally struggling anytime soon. As for Toby, his net worth peaked at over $10 billion, but it has since cooled down to just under $6 billion. Toby doesn't really care much about these numbers though. While he is super passionate about Shopify and grateful that he's able to work on what he loves, he also believes that at the end of the day, Shopify is just a job, and no job will ever take priority over his family or personal health. Just like at the beginning, it looks like Toby still has his priorities straight. What do you guys think about Toby's approach to working? Do you agree that humans shouldn't work past a certain point regardless of the situation? Comment that down below. Also, drop a like if you appreciate Toby being the #1 donator to Team Trees. And of course, consider checking out our international channels to watch our videos in other languages, and consider subscribing to see more questions logically answered. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.